The king's hunger. The first time I saw a man eaten alive, it was by order of the king. I was 13. The men from the king's palace came to our village early in the morning. They didn't knock. They didn't ask questions. They just kicked down doors and dragged out whoever they wanted. They said the king needed workers to build his new palace by the river. My father tried to hide, but they found him. They found me too. My mother screamed and begged, holding my little sister tight, but they didn't care. They tied us together with ropes and marched us to the palace, 10 villages worth of men and boys walking barefoot under the sun. The king's palace was enormous, with walls painted red and gold. But it wasn't beautiful. It felt wrong, like the walls were watching us. They put us to work right away, cutting stones, hauling wood, digging trenches. No food. Barely any water. The guards beat anyone who stopped to rest. The king would come every evening to watch us. He never spoke, just sat on a high wooden throne they carried out for him. He'd smile while the guards whipped us or when someone collapsed. His teeth were yellow, and his eyes never blinked. One night, one of the workers tried to run. He didn't even make it to the trees. The guards caught him and dragged him back, kicking and screaming. That's when the king stood up. "Bring him here," the king said, his voice calm but sharp. They threw the man at the king's feet. The king didn't yell or curse. He just smiled, like this was the most entertaining thing he'd seen all day. "You think you can leave my palace?" the king asked. The man didn't answer, just cried and begged. The king nodded to the guards, and they brought out a large iron cage. Inside were his dogs. I'll never forget those dogs, big, black, and lean. They looked starved. Their eyes glowed like coals in the firelight. "Teach him," the king said. The guards opened the cage. The dogs didn't hesitate. They tore into the man like he was nothing. His screams were the worst sound I've ever heard, but the king only laughed. After that, no one tried to run. 2 weeks later, my father collapsed. The guards dragged him away. I begged them not to take him, but they ignored me. I didn't even get to say goodbye. That night, I walked slower on purpose. When the guards came to beat me, I welcomed it. I hoped the pain would make me forget my father's face. It didn't. I don't know how I survived long enough to escape. The palace guards didn't patrol the river at night, and I swam until my arms felt like they'd fall off. I walked for days until I found another village. Even now, years later, I can't hear a dog bark without breaking into a cold sweat.